Ara-Kara is one of the returning dungeons we'll be facing in Season 3 of The War Within. The dungeon starts with a 30-minute timer, so as long as you complete the dungeon within that time frame, you will upgrade your key. Your goal in the first area of Ara-Kara is to kill 3 mini-bosses to spawn the first boss of the dungeon, Avanoxx. You can route left or right from the start, but for the sake of this guide, we'll be going left. The first mobs that we're going to be dealing with are Engorged Crawlers and Trilling Attendants. Engorged Crawlers will cast Venomous Spit at a random target. This deals moderate nature damage over time that can stack, but it can also be dispelled by specs that can remove poison. If your stacks get high and no dispel is available, you'll need to commit a defensive here. Trilling Attendants are your priority kick mobs in this first area. They have 2 scary casts that we need to kick, the first being Web Bolt. Web Bolt is a single target nuke that deals moderate damage to a random player. Pick this to avoid random deaths, but make sure to kick the next ability, Resonant Barrage. This deals massive party-wide damage over the 8-second channel, so be sure to kick this immediately. The first mini-boss and priority kill mob we encounter is Ixin. Webbolt returns here and should be kicked when possible, but make sure that you have a kick saved for Horrifying Shrill. This cast will fear all players for 6 seconds and also alerts any nearby swarmers to join the fray. Ixin also has a frontal web spray which should be avoided as it deals fatal damage. As web spray is being channeled, there will also be swirlies of webs that players must dodge. The next mini-boss players must focus down is Nact. Nact will repeat Web Bolt and Web Spray that we saw in Ixin, however Horrifying Shrill is replaced with Call of the Brood. Call of the Brood summons web crawlers while dealing large amounts of physical damage very quickly to the entire party. This is quite a large healing check, so healers should be prepared for this going off, and players should be ready with defensives. Finally, we have Attic. Again, Attic will cast a frontal web spray, so players should be ready to dodge this. But this time, Web Bolt is replaced with Poison Bolt, which deals moderate upfront damage and leaves an 8-second nature dot on players. Again, this can be dispelled, but should be kicked where possible. Attic's main ability is Poisonous Cloud. A large poisonous circle will spawn underneath a player and deal massive damage every second to anyone caught in the cloud. Be sure to move out of this as fast as possible. Now that the mini-bosses have been defeated, we face our first boss of the dungeon, Avanoxx. This boss is all about tank positioning and ad management. As soon as this boss is pulled, eggs will spawn that the tank should move the boss away from, but we'll get back to those later. Tanks need to be aware of Avanoxx's first ability cast, Voracious Bite. Avanoxx will leap to the tank and unleash 3 bites, dealing huge physical damage and more importantly increasing damage taken by 50% for 10 seconds. Tanks should be prepared to mitigate this damage and be aware of the 50% increased damage debuff overlapping with other abilities. Now we can go back to the eggs we mentioned at the start. Avanoxx will cast Alerting Shrill, dealing substantial physical damage to the party every 0.5 seconds over its duration, and calling starved crawlers from the eggs that will fixate on nearby players. You'll first want to use a defensive for this cast, but once the ads are spawned, it is extremely important that they do not reach the boss, as she will feast on them with Insatiable, increasing her damage done by a stacking 50%, which will most likely result in a wipe. All players should hard swap to the starved crawlers immediately, and tanks should be prepared to kite away from them if they start getting close to the boss. The final ability for this fight is Gossamer Onslaught. Avanoxx will sling toxic webs beneath players' feet while dealing massive nature damage every second that needs to be healed through. Be sure to dodge the swirlies and you might need to commit a personal defensive here. These swirlies also leave behind vile webbing which snares anyone caught within it, reducing movement speed by 30% and dealing damage over time, so avoid standing in them because they will eventually incapacitate you for 10 seconds. You should try and loosely stack as these swirlies are going out to save room around the encounter. After defeating Avanoxx, players will encounter many new mobs to be aware of. Hulking Bloodguards are your priority kill mob due to their Bulwark of the Weak aura that reduces nearby enemies' damage taken by 50%. These Bloodguards will cast Impale, slamming down a frontal of swirlies dealing large physical damage to anyone caught in them, as well as knocking them back, so stay on your toes. They also have a new ability, Locust Swarm, which deals heavy party-wide damage over the 8-second channel, so use defensives here if needed. Bloodstain Assistants will cast Extraction Strike, dealing moderate damage to the tank and leeching it to themselves, so tanks use a defensive if you're low. Bloodstained Web Mages are the priority kick mob in this area because of their Web Bolt and Revolting Volley casts. Revolting Volley launches a foul mixture of blood and poison at all nearby players, leaving a nasty nature dot which also absorbs healing. This is your highest priority to kick, but you can poison dispel the dot if it does go through, and any spare kicks can go into their Web Bolt. And finally, Sentry Stag Shells must be repeatedly stopped with crowd control on their Alarm Shrill cast. This will summon another hulking blood guard if the channel completes, and it alerts all enemies within 50 yards, which will likely cause a wipe. Now we face the second boss of the dungeon, Anub'zekt. The boss will spawn multiple ceaseless swarms throughout the fight that patrol the boss arena seeking out players to devour. If players are hit, they will receive a lethal stacking nature dot which also slows them, so avoid standing in these at all costs, but if you do, pop a defensive for the debuff. More of these swarms will be dropped when Anub'zekt inflicts a random player with infestation, a separate nasty nature dot that you should commit a defensive to, and upon removal it will leave another ceaseless swarm, so be ready to move out. Anub'zekt will then cover the room in even more ceaseless swarms with his main mechanic, Eye of the Swarm. Upon reaching 100 energy, the boss will cover the entire arena with a cloud of insects that rapidly applies more stacks of ceaseless swarm, so players will need to stay inside the marked safe zone around the boss. Be careful with your positioning during this and also throughout the fight because of his impale frontal that we saw earlier. This deals large amounts of physical damage to anyone caught in its wake, and is also immediately cast on the player targeted by Burrow Charge. This ability burrows the boss towards the targeted player, dealing large physical damage and knocking anyone back caught in its path, so the targeted player should try and bait him into a nearby wall for better uptime, and they should pop a defensive for the hit. The final thing to keep an eye out for during this fight is the bloodstained web mages that will spawn. Kick and focus these adds down, as if they get their channel silken restraints off, players will be immobilized and take increased nature damage, and movement is crucial during this fight, so being unable to do so can be fatal. Now we can head to the last boss of the dungeon. Here we'll find Blood Overseers that will cast Venom Volley. This deals moderate party-wide nature damage immediately, with an additional stacking nature dot which can get out of hand fast. This should be kicked as a priority. They also have an unstoppable Erupting Webs cast which spawns swirlies on the ground that do significant damage and also stun players for 6 seconds, so be sure to avoid these. This mechanic can have some nasty overlaps with the next mob that we'll encounter, which are Reinforced Drones. These drones carry black blood that when dropped will spawn shadowy puddles that root players in place. These roots can be broken with any form of crowd control, so be sure to free yourself or any allies caught so that they don't get killed by the Blood Overseer. Drones will also melee the tank with black blood drenched claws. This applies a stacking 10-second shadow dot that reduces the tank's movement speed and healing received, so healers will need to be on top of dispelling here to keep the tank from falling over. Moving down the stairs, players will most likely pull the patrolling packs of winged carriers which carry the same black blood as the reinforced drones. This mechanic acts exactly the same as before, so be sure to free yourself or allies with crowd control if anyone is caught. And non-tank players will also need to watch out for their dashing strike. This randomly charges the player for hefty physical damage but can prove fatal if multiple target you. The final boss of this dungeon is Kikatau the Harvester. The main mechanic for this boss is Cosmic Singularity. Kikatau will pull all players in, creating a spatial distortion, and upon finishing the cast she will deal fatal damage to anyone caught within. In order to avoid getting hit by this, we must use the pools of black blood dropped by the blood workers that will scurry across the boss arena throughout the fight. Players will need to kill these low HP adds and step into the pools of black blood left behind when the cosmic cast is going off, and after the cast is finished, the root can once again be removed with any form of crowd control or interrupts. Do note that this black blood is absorbed after a single player steps in it, so be sure to spread out and don't get your friends killed by stealing their pools. Kikatau has 2 more casts throughout the fight that players need to be aware of. Cultivated Poison injects a growing poison in 3 players, inflicting lethal damage over time, and upon removal the poison erupts forth in waves on either side of the player, which deals massive damage to anyone caught in their path. Be sure to spread out with this debuff so that your healer can safely dispel, or also for when the dot falls off naturally, but players that suffer the full duration should pop a defensive for the heavy ticking damage. The final cast is Erupting Webs, which we saw earlier on the Overseers. Again, avoid these swirlies at all costs. But that's it for this boss, and that wraps up Ara-Kara City of Echoes for Mythic Plus in Season 3. If you're interested in my nameplates, they are from my free plates profile which can be found inside my Discord. The link will be in the description. And if this guide did help you or a friend out, then please feel free to drop a like down below, subscribe to your boy, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.